Hey everyone, good afternoon, and welcome back to Plain Speak, where we pick the brains of industry experts for a quick 30-minute chat on the intersections of customer service and technology. So today's guest is James Lemire, Director of Customer Experience at HMBradley. HMBradley ensures that anyone has more financial literacy and freedom with their digital banking platform aimed at all of the savers in the room. As we all know, we've lived it. It's been a rough ride for the financial sector over the last year. And as a digital banking platform, HMBradley has been at the center of this uncertainty, working to ensure trust and quality for their customers. So throughout all of this, not only was James responsible for these outbound customer experiences, but he had to navigate this turbulence while still leading a customer experience team. I'm super excited to have him here today. We're going to hear how James brought it all together and how CX played a really big role in getting HMBradley to where it is now. So for those of us joining us at Plain Speak for the first time, my name is Liz Tsai, and I'm the CEO and founder of HiOperator. So HiOp is the leading customer support solution that scales dynamically based on a company's evolving needs. There's no magic, it's just our proprietary customer support engine, HiQ, which leverages generative AI to tackle even the most complex customer requests. So, as a quick housekeeping note, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to put them into the chat or the comment section below. If we don't get to them during the session, we will reach out or post answers on LinkedIn afterwards. So, James, hello. It's fantastic to have you with us today. And for the audience to get your thoughts on the changing landscape of customer service, how technology is reshaping the space, and your experience at HMBradley and the other growing startups you were at before that.
Yes, Liz, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Excited. You're joining us from the East Coast, right?
That's right. I'm in Philadelphia.
Awesome. So to just maybe dive right in, given the state of the economy, lots happening, we have more people focused on their financial health. Can you give us just sort of broad strokes? How has HMBradley sort of operated within that from a customer support perspective?
Yeah, so I'll start with one of the most recent events of this year, which was the collapse of SVB and First Republic. So when that happened, where we were at with our customers, the amount of trust that we had built with them, made it so that the outreach to us was pretty negligible. We weren't really hearing from our customers, and also same with deposit outflows. A very negligible amount of deposit outflows when a lot of depositors were it was a flight to quality. They wanted their money in banks that wouldn't go down, but it was pretty negligible for us. We really didn't hear much. So kind of like how we got there over the last several years was that we kind of had the chance to build trust with customers at several different milestones over the years. Mm-hmm. Whether it was like we changed our product twice, we changed our banking partner once, and our banking core, like the technology underneath what we're doing. So there was a lot of things that happened along the way that we kind of had to guide our customers through to kind of to build trust. So yeah, we had a few different opportunities. Yeah. What in particular would you want to hear more about?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really interesting, right? Because, we bank partially with First Republic, right? And I remember that week very vividly. But, maybe actually just to give our audience here a tiny bit more context, because you mentioned, you guys have a very unique product. It's changed a few times. Can you give us a little bit of color and context around who that customer is, how you guided them through those transitions and context there?
Totally. So when we launched in 2019, actually early 2020, our product was focused around helping customers save. So we were trying to go out and find people who wanted to save. And so the idea behind the product was if you save X% of your deposits, we're going to give you this APY that's better than anybody else. So that's how it started. And then as time went on, we kind of had to make some adjustments to the product, and we were getting customers that had a high credit score. So we're like, okay, this is great. This is working. We're getting the customers we want. Now we need to start like calibrating the product to what it needs to be. And so that necessitated us having to make some really big fundamental changes. So like, okay, like I said, if you save X% of your deposits, you get, this Y APY. But everybody was basically just saving the amount so they get the highest APY. So we were kind of like, a lot of the service we were providing was kind of getting into the minutia of just like math. And so like we kind of wanted to like redirect that. So we started slowly changing some of our product rules so that it could include more people and be a little bit easier to understand. And what that required was like at least once a year, a big change. So when you're changing fundamentally your product offering, or even later on, like last year when we changed our banking partner, like you have to start like the planning process for that is really grueling. There's multiple different outcomes that you could have, and you don't know which one it's going to be.
Yeah.
And these big bets are made at the top, and they don't have the information. Like Zach Brunke, CEO, well, he doesn't have exactly the information we're asking for. So it's kind of like we have to set up for multiple possible outcomes, and ultimately, when things roll out and we get the information that we need, it's never really exactly what we planned for. So like a lot of work is compressed into a small period of time where we kind of have to just go. And so the primary focus there is focusing on like really just team building, keeping like team morale high, because when you're in a state of uncertainty at different points, that can be super challenging for people who are supposed to be planning, and they kind of have to be waiting. So like what's on the other side of the curtain? It's like we don't know, but we have to kind of plan for it. So that became the primary focus, is like focus on the team building, make sure we have motivated people, and kind of keep an eye on morale.
Awesome. Yes, I'm hearing a lot of focus on the team, focus on the morale, right? Because a lot of this, I think customer service is sometimes, they are the integrators that catch all of the balls when things drop, when things don't go exactly according to plan, right? I know you and I have talked a lot about, what's that balance between proactive and reactive, right? Because customer experience sort of sits in the middle of all of that. And maybe just speak a little bit to, what are the other departments that get involved there? And how do y'all sort of play between everyone?
Yes. Okay. So the reactive stuff, like the stuff that's kind of like the bugs, some of the little things. And I've actually seen some of your guests talk about this before, where it's like, okay, you have your priority list of things you want to handle and take care of, and you approach product and engineering, and you're like, this is our priority list. This is exactly what needs to get fixed, what the customers are complaining about. And ultimately, there's the org priorities that sometimes it's hard to see like the full picture. So that takes a lot of communication with product and engineering and operations to figure out like, what is the org priorities? What are we actually trying to do? And like sometimes like it's a test of patience. You're like, okay, these are going to be on our list for a bit. We have to go back and tell customers like, you should expect this to hang around for a bit. So like you have to practice a lot of patience while you stay communicating with these other teams, which that becomes a challenge as time goes on and things kind of get old.
Absolutely, because we're dealing with a lot of factors, right? Because I think strip away all of the, finance and banking turbulence and all of that, you guys also were just a scaling startup, right? So there's that layer of growth. You're starting with a team, you're growing that team. Maybe there's some more junior members of that team, right?
Yes, exactly. So everybody on my team, on the CX team, none of them they all started out with no experience in tech. So it was like I sourced people, really brilliant people who have high EQ, high emotional intelligence, because like to me that's at the center of my philosophy, is like, people who can kind of feel what the customer's feeling, so they understand instinctively like what we need to do in different situations. So you kind of have to equip them with information and coaching to be able to approach some of the brilliant product managers and engineers that we have on our team who are more analytical, and they want information, they want data. Or like, why should this be a priority? And that's true for the little things all the way up to the big things that you mentioned. Like there's like the fundamental product changes that we're asking to be made. Like, hey, customers really don't like this one rule. Perhaps we should change it. So those timelines take longer, and there's a lot more like conversations and persuasion that need to happen.
Yeah. I mean, because
Yeah.
customer service sits at sort of the overlap of a lot of things, right? You need to hire for, like you said, EQ, emotional intelligence. They each on the front lines are getting all that qualitative feedback, right? But then you've got the teams who are trying to influence your marketing, your product, and they are perhaps very quantitative. And I think sometimes there's this frustration of, well, CX is bubbling things up. They've got all the customer stories, but then how do you sort of communicate that and bridge that quantitative gap? And it's always so, I think, satisfying when you find examples of how that actually happened and then drove change throughout. So it sounds like you guys made a ton of product changes, a lot due to what the customers were saying. Do you have any examples here of maybe how you were able to harness that CX team, communicate it, drive change?
Yes, totally. So one of the bigger things that we worked on for like the fundamental changes to the product was one of our rules around the credit card. So, as our product rules changed over the years, like they became it still maintained this, like, if you meet this requirement, we're going to give you that APY. And so when we introduced the credit card, the rule was if you spend $500 on your credit card, like you get that extra bump up.
Mm.
And the information we were seeing from customers was some of them were saying, like, I think some of them were kind of confused because they were like, well, you want me to save my money, and now you're asking me to spend it. And I think internally it made a lot of sense to us, because we're like, well, everybody spends money, like everybody has bills, so like just put your bills on this credit card, and like that things can like work together in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
But I think it was still a point of friction. So it took, I think that we raised this feedback probably for set many quarters, right, over a year and a half, and ultimately through different various channels and ways and means. But I think that, like, ultimately, like, the timing wasn't right. Like, we were changing different, like, too many things were kind of in flux, and it was like, right now is not the right time. And so for us, like, we just had to sit back and like be patient with it and be like, okay, like, we need to be persistent and push this again, while also not like kind of like causing friction internally, too much friction, because we're like, please fix it, and they're like, we can't.
Right.
So where things ultimately ended up is actually at one point this year, we were like, okay, well, how about let's just try this. We have to try different things out too.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just like, right. So we're like, we're just going to connect Zendesk to Slack, and we're going to put all the verbatim in there.
But verbatim, you mean actual customer comments?
That's right. Like,
Okay.
literally, like that. Sometimes that speaks volumes. It's just like, hey, read what the customer's writing, because like we have been summarizing things, making reports and showing things, but like ultimately you see what the customer says, and then you see the deposit outflows, and it's like, well, okay, that actually like kind of like tipped the scale. So we had to wait a long time and be patient, but ultimately, like, we made it happen.
Awesome. And it sounds like that was a lot due to just really taking that direct customer feedback and finding a way to really get that in front of everyone's face, right? It's one thing to know that there are 500 tickets that say this. It's something else to actually see them.
That's true. It's the visibility, like making it visible to the right people at the right time, ultimately. Yeah. So it's kind of an art.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, so high level, right? I mean, with a bunch of variables, growth, changing product, changing economic landscape. And, like you just mentioned, junior team members who might not have a lot of tech experience who are coming into this. How did you, any sort of tips on how you kept your customer support team operating at such a high level?
Yes. I think, like, at the very core of team building is a lot of listening. So that, I mean, like, I try to keep things like fairly simple, especially when we're going through different events, whether it's a big change or if there's like a fire we need to put out. It's like, okay, so it's a couple things. We meet daily, and to talk about like what are the outcome goals for today, and then just listening one by one, asking people like, what are you concerned about? What do you need to kind of like put out to the team? Where do you need help? Like, it's really simple stuff, but doing it on a regular basis created a bond, so that when things get stressful, because ultimately they do when certain events happen, you end up getting a team that kind of like sticks together and works together and covers each other. So you don't have to worry about what anybody else is doing. Everybody's got everybody else's back.
Yep.
And then you get through it and everybody feels great, and you're kind of like, the dust settles and you can focus on the next stretch. But it's really just, it's very simple. It's just listening and then also empowering them with like kind of taking some of the empowering with the information and data that they need. And that's like something like using like a natural language processor. Like I use Chat Desk. They're also a BPO, but I've used their natural language processor feature just to give us like, here's a summary, here's a top 10, here's what you can take and give to others. So like kind of like taking that step and helping that takes an extra thing off their plate that they have to learn and kind of like write with their left hand. So that's kind of what I want to avoid, is like making people learn to write with their left hand, so to speak.
Yes. Unnatural skills that require a lot of talent. No, it's a really good point though, because I think we sometimes forget that we expect customer service and customer experience to operate at a lot of different levels. On the one hand, they need to nail every single contact, which means they need to be super on the ground level, dialed in, right? But at the same time, when you're trying to interface with another team, you can pipe them negative, you can pipe them feedback, but to some extent, it's difficult for them to aggregate all of that individual feedback, right? So I think what you just mentioned, which is, hey, what kind of tools can you sort of pull out to help understand and communicate those contact reasons to the rest of the team, are super helpful.
Yes, 100%. Right. You have to use the tool. I mean, several years ago at Soylent, I did it manually, and it's painful. I went through hundreds of tickets one by one to understand what our distribution was.
Yeah.
Right. And so these days, would never do that. I would just use a natural language processor.
Absolutely. Double click a little bit. You mentioned you use Chat Desk. Tell me a little bit about that platform, how you guys used it, and how you guys send that to other teams.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, like the number one use is to find out what's our top several, like what are the top contact drivers, and then so we keep an eye on it to see what's new, what pops up. So like, what's the reoccurring stuff, what pops up that's new, and for the recurring stuff, you can kind of, you can rate all that, rate the severity, rate the volume, and kind of like figure out, like you use that to prioritize long-term with product and engineering. Like, okay, this one absolutely needs to get fixed. It also helps you see the blips too. Like, okay, now there's like, what's trending right now is like an issue with some ACH transfers. Like that's a high severity problem. We need to jump on that immediately. So it's kind of like this, just like, it's like a very simple like stream of like, here's kind of what's happening. And just leveraging it to try to get ahead of things as soon as possible.
Absolutely. So yeah, having that qualitative, having that quantitative, and then translating it back out. That's so interesting. And I actually loved what you said earlier, which is you have to take advantage of the downtime to really build those team bonds for when you go into busy season. And I know right now Q3 is that time for a lot of our e-commerce friends. What was it for HMBradley? Were there ever times in the year, or were these really much more product cycle driven?
There were a few stretches where we had downtime and we could kind of focus on, like, what I like to say is like replacing like duct tape processes with like these like refined finishing. And there was a few of them. And so like what we did was we kind of like worked on enhancing how we categorize new incoming stuff that's like trending stuff, like get a little bit more nuanced. But sometimes like, so I pushed my team hard during some of those times, like, hey, we got to stretch, let's go.
Yeah.
And so what I've kind of learned to do is kind of like, take a little bit off the top, because we have had certain circumstances where it's like we've been going hard and then something came up. Right. There's always these hopes and dreams of like using these stretches. And so we went pretty hard. And that's kind of what I would be doing differently, is take a little bit off. Like one example is, okay, so we hired a trainer. She was going to train frontline agents. And on day 2, we were experiencing a credential stuffing attack. So people they bought usernames and passwords and wrote a script and were just trying to cram their way into HMBradley. So I was like, welcome, like jump in. And so she spent her first several weeks, like basically like managing something completely different.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a little bit why I've like, I don't know, certain stretches, I kind of like, I try to pace myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing actually that I know we touched a little bit on here is, pacing yourself, pushing the team at times, but then also really trying to figure out, hey, where do we optimize that team, right? Because, you guys, I mean, HMBradley, your team is handling money, right? And there are probably different levels of severity, right? Because, when we think about, hey, it's a ticket surge, not all tickets surge, right? There often are, hey, what are the highest priority issues that we really need the team to push on? And what can we maybe redistribute a little bit? I know you mentioned tagging. Were you guys using some of that to help redistribute that resource as well?
Um, yeah,
Sort of,
we definitely use it to anchor kind of how we build uh, our response approach to these different things. So we're like, okay, like high severity, low severity,
yeah,
axes, and then there's the volume axes, like how many are we getting, and it kind of helps us understand like what we need to do in different situations, and usually. So we use a third party team, and so for anything low severity, like they'll cover a lot of that stuff. Anything high severity that goes to my internal team, the internal CX team, the white glove. So that's kind of how we've used that time to just basically set up these like this matrix for like here's what we do and when, so people can get a custom response because we're dealing with people's money.
yeah,
So like ultimately, it's like you got to make sure the best people are on and paying attention. If there's like an ACH missing, or if somebody needs like if somebody needs a wire a down payment for a home for a bit, like we had to manually do wire transfer. So if somebody wrote in and said like, hey, I need a wire transfer like today to get this house,
yeah.
we basically have to do a drill within the org, work with banking operations, connect a bunch of dots. So that requires like a lot of we need our sharpest people on that.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and I think it makes a ton of sense for using NLP to kind of surface those, right? To get your experts into the right spot.
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. Well, like you've been a super early adopter of NLP, especially if you were using that back in your Soylent days. So you are probably already kind of living the future, James. But as you look to the future, what else are you excited about?
Yeah, so there's a few different things. Like, okay, so one thing is that which you should talk to Zach Runke, CEO, if you want to hear more about it, because HMBradley, we built our own banking core, and that's a really big deal. Like we built all the technology that powers our banking core, and Zach would be way more qualified to talk about it. But also like really like CX related, looking towards the future. I'm just excited to get more elaborate, like getting the tagging of the distribution, matching it up with the AI powered training manual building. Like that is probably one of the things I'm most excited to use. Like there's couple different things. There's like Trainual and Scribe that
Yeah.
like basically they just follow you around the screen, and then when you're done doing what you need to do, it like pops it up like, okay, like here's how you do it. That's kind of like dream scenario. I guess like the last remaining thing is like figuring out like, or not even really last remaining thing because it's out there. Like so you're kind of doing it in a way which is like, here's the response for it. Like here's what you actually say to them. Because like anytime that my team doesn't have to spend on that stuff, they can be focusing on the more complex stuff. Like how do we drive like project management internally, or like handle these more nuanced things. So like that's what I'm most excited about, is kind of taking some of those like documentation building stuff and just getting machines to do that.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense, right? Because I think humans are so much the core and soul of that white glove service. But humans are highly leveraged and expensive, and they don't like doing the same thing every single day. So it really is, how do you leverage all that AI and automation to either spin them up faster, those AI training manuals, or just, in their day-to-day, giving them more leverage.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. It's not like super difficult stuff, but it takes a lot of time and attention, and you have to put a lot of effort into it. So like it takes away energy that you can be using for those things, for different things.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I love that AI training manual. That's a really unique use case
Yeah.
in there. Cool. Well, look, I know we're coming towards the end of lunch hour, or lunch 30 minutes for a lot of folks. So James, thank you for sharing a little bit about those unique challenges of both scaling, but also scaling in a fintech regulated product where you are literally handling people's money. Really appreciate that. We like to cap off with just an easy, fun, rolling question of the week. So yours is coming from our guest 2 weeks ago, Annalise Poda, Head of Customer Support at HipCamp. And she'd like to know, if you lived in the Middle Ages, what would your job be?
Yeah, so I think I would be I'd be a blacksmith. I feel like when I was a kid, I used to take my dad's like soldering, like the graphite, and like make jewelry out of it. You know, like make a ring or like a little spear. So there's just something about like hitting a hammer against an anvil that's really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, maybe full time might be kind of tough. Like if it's full time, maybe I do like weave tapestries or something like that.
Love it. Love it. Two skills in the arts. So
Yeah.
I'm a blacksmith, James, just saying. Um, awesome. And what would be your question for our guest in 2 weeks?
Yes. So for the next guest, I would love to know how you cook your eggs. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I I usually do a French omelet every time, and that's because I got the right pan. I think like the pan determines the eggs. For a while I was making different types of eggs, but once I got a new pan, it was like French omelets all the way.
Okay, I've watched a lot of Gordon Ramsay, but what pan and why?
Oh, so it's like I think an enamel cast iron.
Okay.
And so it's because with this just a straight up cast iron, like you have to put a lot of oil or like butter in there, just like way too much. So the enamel cast iron makes it so that it's like the surface is really slippery just with a little bit of butter
Mm.
or a little bit of oil. So that means I can like really like delicately fold that omelet so it's like a perfect little like tube. So yeah.
You get that even heat from the cast iron. I'm gonna have to try this out and check back in. James, thank you so much. Super insightful to have you on and hear about how you guys help customers and led your CX team to navigate the rocky waters through all of the economic stuff going on. Everyone, thank you again for tuning in to spend some time with us today. If you have any customer support questions, please reach out. And please do come join us for our next Plain Speak. It's going to be in 2 weeks, Wednesday, August 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern, where we are going to chat all about how to create trusted partners by mastering the B2B marketplace with Ryan Stevens, the head of operations at Clutch. Thank you all so much and see you soon.